Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for spending your lunchtime with us. My name is Kimberly LeBlanc, and I have the privilege of being the Academic Chair for Nurses Specialized in Wound, Ostomy, and Continence Canada. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce you to a nursing legend in Canada, and she's going to start to blush. But it's my privilege to introduce you to Nicole Denis. Now, Nicole, for many of you needs no introduction, but Nicole is certainly one of our legends and has been one of my heroes for a long time. To give you a bit of background, Nicole started nursing, let's say a while ago. She started as a diploma nurse and graduated in 1973. And then very quickly got addicted to learning. And in 1981, traveled out to Vancouver to become an interstomal therapist, as we were called at the time. From 1982 to 1984, Nicole was actually one of the first presidents of the Canadian Association of Interstomal Therapists. And caught that learning bug, I guess, pretty early, and went on to do her bachelor's in nursing science in 1988. And then became the editor of the LINC, the Journal for NSWOCs, or Interstomal Therapists, from 1988 to 92. And then, lucky for all of us, in 1996, she had the vision to start what we then used to call the ETNEP, or the Interstomal Therapy Nursing Education Program. And I have the privilege of being able to say that I was your first student, Nicole. My student number, if you look it up, is 001. And it was revolutionary in terms of was also one of the first truly distance education programs for nurses in Canada. And then in May 2001, she completed her Master's of Nursing Science degree. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you, Nicole. It's certainly always inspirational when you and I talk. So I guess I want to start by asking you if you could tell us what path led you to become what was then an ET nurse? Like, what inspired you and what made you decide to go on this journey?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this discussion, Kim. I'm very flattered. Actually, it started in nursing school. We had a lecturer, a very charismatic young man, who came to us to explain his journey with an ostomy. We all know him in Ottawa, of course. At the time, he had a terrific impact on me. Because I knew very little about ostomies. Obviously, as a nursing student, we don't necessarily have the opportunity to see any patients with ostomies during our studies. But he had his ostomy as a young man. He had a career. He had a business. He had a wife. He had children. And I was in awe of this man, of his journey, not of the man, but of his journey. So I always had an interest for the patient population. When I was a surgical nurse, that was my first love. I was a surgical nurse. And whenever there was an ostomy patient, he was assigned to me. And I took care of ostomy patients, and I loved it. Back in the 70s, when I was nursing at the bedside, the patients were in for primarily abdominal perineal resections, which were permanent colostomies. We dealt with them very differently than we do now. They were taught to irrigate. We had a privileged relationship with them. They were in the hospital for 2 to 3 weeks. So I got to know these patients very, very well because I had them every single day that I was nursing while they were in the hospital. So it was a very interesting career. And then one of the people in the education department realized that I had a keen interest in it and started involving me in products and selecting products. And I was even given the privilege to order products for patients whenever I felt that what we had in-house was not appropriate. And then I looked into the course, was registering, in the process of registering for the course in the States, because I did not know of a Canadian program. And I went to this person who was supporting me to ask her to give me a reference, because we required a reference. And she said, the hospital will be moving to a new site in 1980. This was in 78, 79. And she said, the hospital will be moving to a new site in 1980. We were in the process of having a building redone. And she said, there will be money to send someone to a program. I'd like you to wait. So I waited, applied for the position in 1980, got the position, and went to Vancouver and trained.
And how did that program in Vancouver, I guess, not only inspire you, but how did it differ from what we're looking at today from the
Oh my
education?
goodness. There was no comparison. There was no classroom. Theory was self-directed. You had to learn theory on your own. So, you know, someone who came without a surgical background was really at a disadvantage because there was no theory. You learned it. It was self-directed theory. However, it was a 6-week preceptorship. We started under the tutelage of an interstomal therapist. There were 3 of them there in that clinic. So it was a very busy hospital for colorectal surgery. And we spent time with all 3 of them. And then we were given a patient assignment. So we built our own patient population that we would follow every day to see how they're doing, to do the teaching, we took over the whole program. So there were 3 students and 3 preceptors. And we spent 6 weeks with them.
Very, very different than today. Did you do wound?
Very different.
That just ostomy, or did you do continence and wound as well?
We only did ostomy, and we did a little bit of wound. New wound was just starting when in the early 80s. There was not a whole lot of body of knowledge for wound, but we would be okay. Where there were ulcers around stomas, we would deal with these ulcers, and then we would translate that knowledge to other types of ulcers. The pressure ulcers and the pressure injuries and things like that. So we were just starting to make links related to wounds in those days. And certainly no continence other than skincare.
I remember being fascinated when I graduated from nursing in 1992. I was fascinated by the concept of wound care. And I used to follow around RET nurse like a little puppy because she seemed to know so much about wound and ostomy, and continence was just coming in then as well. And I remember just being blown away by the breadth of knowledge.
Well, we were fortunate because we learned as the knowledge was being developed. It's easy to retain because there's not a whole lot of backlog that we have to pick up. We're learning it as it's being developed, as it's being learned about. So that was a very interesting education, very interesting.
So let's take a step back and let's talk about the history of CAET, because you were around for the beginning of that CAET, not just our education program.
Yes.
So for most of the NSWOCs today, we see this large association, relatively large by nursing standards in Canada association. It's a well-oiled machine. We have a CEO, we have office staff, we have, I have a whole host of people working with me. But when you started, it was very much around a kitchen table. Do you want to tell us a bit about the inspiration for how it got started, how you broke away from the international panel, and really how our career, like my career, got formed because of what you ladies did?
Well, I wasn't really involved in the International Association of Interstomal Therapy, of which we were a region when we belonged to the States. But I know that our representative was Eileen Bearer, who was an interstomal therapist in Vancouver. And a lot of this activity took place in Vancouver. I think they had the vision, and certainly Diane Gard, who was a member of the IAET, and there wasn't a lot of Canadian members to the IAET, but there were enough members to have a region for us. They got together, yes, around a kitchen table and decided that we had to break away. Our issues were different. Our healthcare system was different. We really had to start looking at how we could become independent. And in 1992, we became, at our first national conference in Toronto in 1982, I'm sorry, I'm misleading you, we became our own entity, the Canadian Association for Interstomal Therapy. We were incorporated, we had our bylaws, we the whole situation was well taken care of. We had an auditor and whatever. And we started having annual conferences. So this was very interesting as well. And already in 1982, we talked about certification and how important it was in Canada for us to be certified with Canadian standards. So we've been talking certification for eons by the time we came about to be able to do it. The issue was always the numbers. We were a small organization, and that was the reality in those days. I was the only interstomal therapist in my hospital. In Ottawa, there was 2 at the Civic Hospital, but no other hospitals had interstomal therapy. There was only 2 of them in the community. So there wasn't a lot of manpower there, and most of the larger cities had about that kind of numbers. So we weren't a very big group, but we were a very busy group. We did a lot of things. We did a lot of things.
Certainly I remember when I joined, when I became an ET back in 97 and got involved, what I was struck with was right away was the sense of history and the sense of family. I really felt embraced. And at that time, there was only 6 interstomal therapists in Quebec, where I was located. But I felt at any given time, I had a network across Canada. And that was something that really struck me. I remember many times picking up the phone and calling you in Ottawa saying, help me, I've got this patient, this is what's going on with them. And you used to sit there on the phone and walk me through it. I mean, things have gotten easier now with technology, and we can FaceTime and use Teams and Zoom and all kinds of different platforms. But even back in 1997, there was that sense of community. And I know my first couple of conferences I went to, they were small by today's standards. But man, the learning that took place and the collegiality and the support, it's something that I don't think you see in all other professions. And I think that's one of the things that sets us apart as in our specialty, then as ETs, now as NSWOCs. And, I think that the work that you all did, and were you the first president, or you were one of the first presidents?
No. I'm actually, I think I misled you. I was president from 92 to 94. Not 80 to 84.
Okay.
Marie Burroughs.
No.
Marie Burroughs was actually our first president. Eileen Bearer stepped down because our link with the IAET was broken at that 82 conference, and Marie Burroughs was elected as our first president.
So for those of you on the call who don't know, Marie Burroughs was another one of these nursing leaders that really, inspirational. And, I'm not going to start naming them all because I know I'm going to miss some, but, there
have been several.
Like for me personally, it was you and Kathy Foster, who were
Kathy
really,
was great. Kathy was great. She was one of my.
Kathy Foster was a trailblazer. She was, she was a president of CAET, and she went on to become president of the World Council of Interstomal Therapists as well. That was in 97. Sadly, she passed away shortly thereafter, and we lost one of the great ones. But she, there's been so many. We could start listing, Shirley McSavney, Diane Gard. The list goes on to the number of inspirational leaders we've had. There's been, you and I both have been around a little while, and we've seen healthcare go through many changes and iterations. Sadly, we keep coming back, I think, to the same barriers to providing care. And I was just reading an article this morning that talked about the value of the WOC nurse and how the editorial comment was how shocking it was that despite almost 50 years of evidence showing that when a specialty nurse is involved, care is improved, costs are contained, patients are happier with fewer complications and better quality of life. Our profession, there's many places that still don't have access to NSWOCs. So I want to discuss a little bit some of the barriers that you've seen over your career and how you've had maybe some tips on how you've overcome them. Because I can remember
Wow.
when I was a student, when they decided they didn't need an ET nurse at the hospital you were working. And I
Yep.
remember just being flabbergasted that here you
Yep.
were the director of the program, you were my mentor, you were, my go-to person for one of the most knowledgeable ETs in Canada, and they changed you to a general educator position.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, wow, how did that happen? So can you talk about some of those barriers and what you did to overcome them?
Well, you learn lessons with these barriers. And that's the good thing, is you learn lessons. I think the first barrier I encountered was when I came back from Vancouver. The physicians were extremely threatened by my position. They thought I was there to judge their surgical powers or prowess, which I certainly had no intentions of doing. I was a nurse and I was there to care for the patients. But I was really, it was a very difficult situation. They kept trying to embarrass me. They kept trying to make me feel as if I didn't know anything, that I was just, yes, that kind little nurse. Because you have to remember, historically, when I started nursing, we still stood up when the physician came into the rooms. Like we didn't sit writing notes if the physician came in. We stood up and gave him the chair. So, that's, things have changed, and I'm so happy that they've changed. But that was my first hurdle, was getting the physicians to believe in me. And it's the patients that did that for me, because the patients came back to the physicians over and over again and would say, oh, she's so kind and she's so nice and she solved my problem and she's working on it. And so I was very fortunate. And we are all very fortunate with our relationships with our patients, because I think we're very privileged to develop these relationships. That was, and then the other hurdle that was consistent throughout my whole nursing career was nurses. The nursing administration, nurses eat their young. Well, it's true, nurses eat their young. And if they don't know what you're doing, it's easier to eat them. It's easier to get rid of them. And I think that is one of the things that I wasn't very good at, is telling people, my manager, I always had a lot of support from my immediate managers, but it never went, I don't know where it went from there, but it's when I lost that support from my immediate manager, because they moved on to different jobs and we were kind of merged with the medical team, and the medical director knew nothing about me and didn't particularly care about ostomy patients. Therefore, it was easy to say, well, we have to cut the budget, let's cut that position. And I was fortunate because I was in the union and I was able to bump into the surgical educator position. And I was, that threw my career kind of off to the side for a couple of years. I was only in that position for 4 years. 4 years? No. Yeah, 2000, no, probably 2 years. And then I went on sabbatical for my master's. I was offered a fellowship to do 1 year off full-time on my master's. So I did the fellowship, the research fellowship. And then I think my employer didn't think I was going to come back. So they recreated the position, because then they decided they split surgery and medicine aside again. And the colorectal surgery program from the civic was being moved to the general. The hospitals had merged. There was a lot of changes. The surgeons from the civic, who were used to having intrastomal therapists, decided, we're not going to the general if you don't have one. So, and I thank Dr. Stern for being adamant about it, because it's thanks to him that the position was recreated. And then when I came back after my sabbatical, I was told the position was recreated, but I had to apply. And I refused to apply, because I'm stubborn like that. I said, why would I apply for my job? And then they went to the union, and the union waived it, and I was able to reintegrate the position. But it's there, I realized after the fact, my boss needs to know what I do, but not only my boss, the directors, the VP, everyone needs to be aware of what I do and my impact on patients. So I would tell patients, write letters. If you don't want this to happen again, write letters. And that was one of the things that happened when I lost the position, is my patients wrote letters, but they were writing them to the surgeons. And the surgeons have no power on nursing positions. You know, we affiliate ourselves with the surgeons because we work very closely with surgeons, but they don't have any power for the nursing department in my kind of facility. Maybe in a smaller facility, yes. But I mean, the Ottawa Hospital was a big box. And for nursing, no, they had no power. They couldn't do anything to protect the position.
Yeah, and I think that maybe that was a big surprise to them when they realized that they didn't actually have power.
I think so. I think it was a wake-up call for them.
Yeah, I think definitely. And, you know, I think what you've highlighted is something that a lot of nurses have come through, to whether they're an ET NSWOC nurse or not, where at some point or other, a nurse is considered to be a nurse, and
Exactly.
that we're not as far as specialty. I apologize, everyone. I am trying to get over this cold. But, you know, certainly, you know, they think of us as a nurse, and that they can just move us around. I know personally, if you tried to remove me to the intensive care, it would not be good outcomes for patients. Put me in a surgical unit and I'm going to be just fine. But put me on medicine or cardiac or pediatrics or, you know, psychiatry, I would just end up joining the patients, quite frankly. It would be easier. But, you know, I think that, you know, you've highlighted something else, and that's, as nurses, we're not used to having to justify what we do and who we are.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, having statistics and those outcome metrics are so important. Can you maybe talk to a little bit about how, like, for the nurses, especially the younger NSWOCs who are on the call, how you went about justifying your position in terms of statistics and proving to your boss and your boss's boss and the boss's boss's boss how important it is to have an NSWOC on staff?
Well, I had statistics from day one. I always, because that was one of the things they explained to us when I did my training in Vancouver, that was very important to keep statistics. So I kept statistics from day one. I showed over the years progression of the number of consults I was doing, the number of patients I was seeing. By the end of my 28-year career, I had gone to like 1,000 consults or 1,000 visits a month, compared to 20 visits or 30 visits a month when I started. But you know, the progression of the interventions that you do, at the time it was like, I'm not a pure researcher, that's not my goal in life, but I was trying, especially in wound care, because I was learning as the theory was being developed, I was involved in research. I participated with the trial of the first national Canadian pressure ulcer prevalence study under Kathy's Foster's tutelage. We were invited to attend the first National Pressure Ulcer Advisory Panel in Washington, D.C., which we were 3 Canadian intrastomal therapists there. We decided that we could do this prevalence study national right away. We weren't going to be afraid, whereas the states were still hemming and hawing about it. So we came back and did a trial run. We developed the tool. We worked together with the statistician, I think from your hospital in Montreal. And we developed our tool. We did a trial run. My hospital participated in the trial run. We looked at the data. It looked to be significant data. So then we threw the invitation out at our national conference. Whoever wants to participate, get on board. And that's how the national statistics came out in that year. So that was quite exciting. My hospital supported that kind of endeavor there. Yeah, to be in, you know, the first in Canada to do this. This was certainly something the general, at the time we were still the general, wanted to do. So participated in research in that sense. Did some clinical research. Certainly when I was quite questioned very early on, stage 1. A and B, because we used to separate stage 1A and stage 1B. Stage 1A would resolve, stage 1B would worsen. And I kept saying, there's got to be a difference in stage 1. They're not all the same stage 1. So I did some retrospective reviews. That kind of thing led to my being more, people around me being more aware of what I could contribute to the institution. But it wasn't enough to save my job, that's for sure. Because that was all done before 96, before. Because again, if you don't have a boss who knows what you do and who actually values what you do, it's very difficult. But certainly statistics, maintaining statistics, being able to demonstrate to your boss at a drop of a pin, this is what I'm doing. These are the people I'm seeing. This is the programs I'm impacting. You know, and I think all of us are involved in product trials, are involved in, you know, many, but it's to getting your foot into that, because the first time I wanted to go to purchasing to get some information, the door was closed. Well, you're not a director, you can't do that. And I'm saying, yeah, but I'm the one who wants this product in the building. And I've got the approval of my boss, and I've got the approval of the director. Where do I go now if I don't come to purchasing with my request? So then, oh, well, let's talk about it. And then, you know, you had to open every door, because the doors weren't open to nurses, because you're considered a nurse is a nurse.
I think you've hit on some really good points. And I know certainly back when I was in little neophyte ET nurse, one of the things you drilled into me was, Kim, you have to keep statistics. So I could have told you at any given time how many wounds I was seeing, what type of wounds they were, when they came on my service, when I healed them or closed them, when the person was discharged, how many I used to actually track them to see how many returned to the hospital. Ostomies, back then we had the privilege, as you said, we followed them for 2 weeks in hospital, and then for the rest of their life after they left hospital at that point. So I kept very detailed statistics as well on the type of ostomies, how often I saw them, you know, the kind of products we were using. We did quality of life surveys with the patients. We did regular prevalence of incident studies. Now, sadly, the landscape has changed so much that we could no longer, with the changes in ethics, we could no longer stand at a conference and kind of say, hey, who wants to throw in their data? We can't do that anymore. But I think what your group did was you set the stage that now, because of that work you did, just about every acute care facility in Canada monitors pressure injuries. And a lot of that stemmed from the work that you all did, which was very, you know, it was groundbreaking benchmarking work. And, you know, now most of us are involved in what we call PUP studies, even though I guess they should be called PIP studies now. But I can't keep up with the terminology. But I think one thing that's really important for younger NSWOCs to know is that you have to push your way in the door to make sure that you're part of that study. You should be leading it. So as Nicole said, I think it's so important that you know, you're going to have a lot of doors closed in your face, and it's a matter of then looking for a window to get through. You know, there's, you know, the adage of, you know, don't wait to be invited to the table, take a chair and drag it up to the table. And that's really, you know, and you have to, you know, as nurses, I think we're really good. And I know, Nicole, you are the queen of this, making people do things and they make them think it's their idea. I know, because I work with you and you get me to do things all the time, and you make me think it's my idea when it was really you planted the seeds to make it happen. But I think it's a way that we can, as nurses, and particularly as NSWOCs, we can collaborate with other people and plant seeds and slowly build relationships. But you can't work in isolation. And the more you collaborate, the more people are going to know what you do and the value that you do. And I think part of that is education as well. You know, and that was something else I think you really revolutionized, was the idea of educating other nurses. There was a time when ET nurses had the reputation that we held all the knowledge in and that we wouldn't share it.
We were afraid of losing our jobs.
And
which is never a case.
Never happened. Anytime we give education, our consults go up.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about some of the education programs, like this, your skincare education day that you guys put on?
Oh my goodness, we used to have a skincare called Skintastic. This was we offered this to our nurses, who usually we had skin champions across all of the units we had one or two nominated by their charge nurse to attend the Skintastic Days. And these were full days of education, and there were exhibitors there, and there were the exhibitors that we had their products in our building. They provided lunch for us. At the time we could get away with that. That was good. They provided breaks for us. We had little tests. We had games for them. We developed games. We had a Jeopardy game for them, where they could participate and win prizes related to some of the content that we were presenting at this Skintastic fair. So, and we held that annually because we know that nurses move around, and sometimes the skin champion would leave. So we would have new skin champions come on board every year. And we were just adding to the body of knowledge that was floating around on the units, which was great. So we did that for several years.
I think one of the great things that did come out of that as well was that when we look at how many now NSWOCs we have in the city, and many of them got their first taste from attending your Skintastic Day. I remember when I moved here in 2000 and, worked with you for a while at the hospital, attending some of those days. It was really wonderful to see the excitement on people and then now when I look at some of the participants and I see them 23 years later as NSWOCs, and it's sort of like, oh, these are more of Nicole's children. So I want to switch gears a little bit, well, still on the education theme, but walk us through how you started the ETNET program and some of, kind of how it's evolved into where I have it today. Because you started all this. You're responsible for, I would say, 90% of the NSWOCs in Canada. You've had a hand one way or other in our education, whether people realize it or not. So how did you get this, how did you go about getting this started?
Okay, in 1995, so at our national conference, a colleague approached me to tell me if I would be interested to chair an ad hoc committee to develop the CAET ETNET program. And because I had expressed during meetings and many times in the past that we needed to have a Canadian program, because all of our programs had closed. We had Vancouver closed shortly after I attended, I think in '83. We developed two university affiliated programs, one in English and one in French. Both of them closed because they were not financially viable for the universities. And now we were back in a situation where our students, our potential ETs had to go to the States at a time where our dollar was 45 cents to the dollar. Like, it was outrageously expensive to do the programs in the States. So finally, the board of directors had decided that, yes, this was the time to do it. We got some funding from industry to support the project. So I was approached by a colleague who had been approached by the board. So it was kind of a roundabout way to see if I would chair that ad hoc committee. And I said, well, I need to think about it. So I went home and spoke to my husband about it. And he said, well, this is your passion, because when I came out of my ET program in '81, I went to my boss and I said, I will run the first bilingual ET program in Canada. That was my dream. And I've always said it was my dream. So he said, well, that's your dream. Why would you say no? So I said, okay, fine. So then the president at the time was Donna Weiss. And Donna, I had a conference call with her, and I said, yep, I'll do this, but this is what I need. And we approved a budget for it. And we had, I gathered my group. We met for a week, for 5 working days and twice, and developed the program in that during those 2 meetings. So there was someone from The people on this were Maureen Coe, Karen, oh my goodness, I can't remember Karen's last name. She was in Manitoba at the time, but now she works for Hollister, I think. Karen Campbell.
Karen Spencer. Karen Spencer.
Oh, Spencer. Yeah, Karen Spencer. There was Claire Westendorp. There was my lovely, lovely Kathy Much from PI. And there was Diane St. Cyr from Montreal. And myself. That's it. That's how we started. We started with a face-to-face 5-day meeting, developed the outline of the program. They were sent away to do their work. They each had we developed units, and they each had their unit to populate, to develop assignments, to write exam questions, to get references, to get resources, to support learning. And I would put it all together. And then our second meeting, we went through the process, how students would apply, what were the prerequisites, et cetera, and we put all that together, and that's how it was. So in 1996, when we went back to conference, we presented this to the members, and it was launched. We started in English, and probably about a year later, we enrolled French students. Because then I needed the year to translate.
I remember those early days. As it said, yeah. Kathy Foster basically handed me the application and said, "You will apply." So I applied, and I remember getting this big box in the mail. Back in the days when we could actually photocopy articles, so there was copies of every article I needed to receive, and I believe it was Hollister donated the textbooks. So we had
there were 3 companies that donated the textbooks. There was Hollister, Combitech, and I can't remember who did the third one. I have a blank.
Coloplast, maybe?
Oh, Coloplast. Yes, that's it. Those 3 companies have supported us throughout. Whether it was textbooks, whether it was awards, I mean, they have been our backbone. If we hadn't had the companies, we wouldn't. Industry, it would have been probably a little bit more difficult.
I think that's a great example of how we've been able to collaborate ethically with industry. Those kind of unrestricted grants, and it was, ethical collaboration. And I remember getting the packages and with a timeline of when I had to do the readings and exams and, everything, having a proctored exam, and then I'd mail it back to you, and then I'd sit for 3 weeks biting my nails and I'd send in an assignment, and you'd send in your next assignment would be due before you'd get the other ones back, but you'd call us and say, okay, it's in the mail, but it could take 3 weeks to get to you. So here's your feedback. And, it was a very different way of learning.
It was.
But we've certainly evolved. And certainly we've actually still followed that same kind of format when we're redeveloping the course of bringing together content experts. We've since then, certification, I think, has really helped us. Yeah. And that is something, we owe you and your group as well. I remember in 97 being part of a certification task group then. And basically from 97 till 2006 behind the scenes with you guys to get certification. And, it was a long journey. As you say, it was a 20-year journey for most of you to get there, but
absolutely,
having those core competencies and standards of practice, you've done us all a great service, because by you and your colleagues developing this, you've set the foundation now that really stands us apart from many other programs. Now, if I'm getting the timeline right, Susan Mills-Orzes took over from you when you decided to retire from the program. And
Lise Cardinal. Lise Cardinal had the French group, and Susan Mills-Orzes had the English group. Lise only stayed for 1 year, and then I think Diane Grégoire replaced her.
Okay. And then
years there.
At that time, was it Susan Mills-Orzes who brought it online, or was it Virginia McNaughton?
It was Susan. She was doing her master's in informatics.
Right.
Nursing informatics. And she brought it online. And then
Yeah.
Susan is the one who contacted me in 2007 to see if I would work with the French program in 2007.
And then you came back into the fold.
Then I came back into the fold of ETNEPs and NSWOCs and
Well,
the
just,
Academy
you know,
and the
so
Institute,
people
and
know.
whatever you want to call us.
Susan Milzores has brought us online as part of her master's project, which really shows as well how NSWOCs, and you know, the story gets time and time again, how an NSWOC went and did their master's, and during their master's project, they focused on some aspect of NSWOC nursing and how it changed kind of career paths, and it added to the body of knowledge we have. And for a landscape like Canada's, having this online was definitely revolutionary at the time. So once again, so ahead of the curve. Nobody else was doing distance education that way. And now in the beginning, you know, it was rudimentary PowerPoints, and you know, it was definitely not what we look at today. And I know that Virginia brought it to the next level, really doing the groundwork to get it put into a program that would have simulation and more interaction. And you know, I've been fortunate. I came in during a time with AI explosion and all the kinds of platforms and resources. So my job was relatively easy compared to yours. But you know, you and Susan and Virginia, the three of you laid the groundwork and the foundation for the program we have today, where we have over 110 graduates a year from our program, if we combine English and French. So it certainly has expanded. And you know, as you know, one of our recent kind of sidearms from this has been the establishment of the Skin Wellness Associate Nurse Program as well. So that we can incorporate all nurses into the NSWOC family.
Quite exciting.
You know, I think it's a very exciting time. What do you think some of the things that have changed for NSWOCs nursing? Like where do you think we're headed?
I think we've grown. I think our reputation has grown. I think I think our credibility has grown, our body of knowledge, and our best practice. I think the fact that we practically insist that our practice is based on facts and on literature and on research has led us to be more credible in other professions. I think as far as physician relationships now, it's a done deal. They know the value of an NSWOC. Our nursing colleagues know the value of an NSWOC. The bedside nurses, certainly. Administrators, you still need to make the case about the value of, you're never going to get away from that, because administrators have one thing on their mind, and it's money. It's dollars and cents. They don't care about patient. I was told point blank, I don't care if the patients are happy. I can't afford you. I need to cut the budget. That's the kind of reasoning administrators have. Whereas we're the softer ones. We're the ones who care about how the patients are cared for and how the patients feel, and we're the really touchy people. But administrators are not. So we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify the quality of life piece. So, you know, this just brings us back.
You need to talk dollars and cents. You need to talk their language. Because if you talk their language, then they listen. But if you don't talk, if you say, oh, well, the patients get better quality of care, they don't care about that.
Yeah. You have to equate that better quality of care to.
I can get them out of the hospital 3 days earlier. Okay, now I'm listening.
Yeah.
What can you do to get them out of the hospital and how much is it going to cost me to get them out of the hospital within that time frame? So you need to keep that in mind when you're starting your practice or you know, getting into a practice where there are other people. Your group has to be cohesive. You have to work together because it's very easy for administrators to see if there's a breach in the group, and then it becomes the place where we can break the group. break the group up.
Yeah.
So if you're many NSWOCs in your own facility, or you need to work together. And if there's an issue, well, you need to deal with it as a group and not go off.
I think that's really good. I think that's really good advice. Now, when we're looking at the future of WOC nursing, we've changed the landscape in Canada now in terms of we've introduced another dimension of WOC nursing. So we have NSWOCs and we have SWANs. And, our position is that we need to be working collaboratively together. We're all nurses and we come at things from different perspectives, and given we have different scopes of practice, but it's really important that we collaborate together and we respect each other. And I think, you just hit the nail on the head in terms of your wound, ostomy, and continence care teams. The need to collaborate together, work out any differences internally. And we've got to try not to eat our young as nurses.
Oh, yes, please.
I mean, we've been fighting this battle since the beginning of nursing. But I think, a challenge that we can put out there is, as NSWOCs and SWANs, let's not eat our young. Let's foster it. Let's welcome people into the family and let's support them into these roles. Absolutely. Because moving into like a specialty role can be very scary and daunting when you're first out there. And if you don't have a mentor or someone that can, just guide you through, it can be very scary. So what advice would you have for yourself now, if you were just starting out, or for an NSWOC and SWAN just starting out, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Surprisingly enough, when I was a nurse, when I first became a nurse, I was very shy. I was extremely timid, and it was difficult for me to break out of that. I know you laugh. You don't believe me, but it's true. I was very timid, and it was difficult for me to break out of it, especially to speak to physicians and to speak publicly, and I forced myself to do that. And you need to force yourself to be in the forefront in your facility, because if you don't, nobody's going to pull you out. Nobody's going to go get you. You need to be the one to take your courage and say, okay, this is what I will do. I will present at our national conference. I will talk to my boss to see if I can participate in that meeting because I have something to say about it. This is the type of approach. It's a lot easier now because with Zoom and with the this kind of forum, it's less intimidating than standing in front of an audience and seeing them. Certainly over the years, I've stood in front of many, so it's less intimidating doing it on Zoom. But you need to put yourself out there because nobody's going to go get you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And not everybody has career aspirations to necessarily lead organizations or programs, but certainly you've done a lot of presentations, both locally, nationally, and internationally. You're internationally recognized for your work. And, I think that you raise a really good point that you got to start slowly, put yourself out there. A lot of nurses are intimidated to publish, and we do have the NSWOC Advance. That is a gentle way to start publishing. Lena Martins, who's our editor, is very, very gentle and very mentoring. So she, and she'll nurture you if you're interested in presenting for the first time or to developing a poster or an article. So I think we've got a little bit of time, so I'm going to open it up to some questions. So there was one question that came in, and this is something we hear a lot around templates for keeping stats. Do you have any tips on that? I know that I can probably jump in and say that most people don't have. We all keep different kind of templates, and I think that might be something that maybe we want to create a task force on to developing some templates. Do you have any that you have in your archives?
No, I left them all at the hospital. Yeah. I left them all for my successor, who has just recently retired. I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Well, I think that's one of the problems that we all have. I had all mine from the Montreal General, but those belong to the McGill University Health Center, so I couldn't take them with me. But maybe, this is something, I think it's a great question. And certainly, we
I
talk
think it's
about
a great project for someone, who wants to take this on, to look at what kind of statistics would be of value to really put a position out there and just develop a straw dog and make it available.
Yeah. And one of the things that's with now I'm saying this like it's so easy but I can't do it. But with all the things you can do with Excel now,
Oh my goodness, yes. It
we
tells
could
a lot of
we
stories.
could have drop down, we could have all kinds of neat things. So I think this would be something that, maybe we really want to look at as an association. So I know that Kathy Harley and Troy Curtis are listening, and Troy right now is cringing behind the scenes because Troy makes all my Excel spreadsheets for me. So I know that behind the scenes he's cringing. But I think, after our conference, this is something that maybe we want to look at. And, maybe Nicole will bring you in as an advisor on that because of your wealth of information and knowledge around stat keeping.
You're keeping me busy, Kim. I have many, many other projects to deal with right now.
One thing I think we forgot to tell everybody is that while Nicole officially retired from the hospital some time ago and has attempted to retire several times from the WOC Institute, she is currently our preceptor manager. So she oversees all of clinical placements in Canada, both in English and French. So she has a team that works for her, but Nicole is really, every single student that comes to our program has Nicole's fingerprints on, because you are heavily involved with every single one of our graduates on the NSWOC side of things. So, certainly, it's you've definitely contributed a lot, and I know that you have a lot of knowledge you could bring us for this type of project. But we'll make you as an advisor, not as because I know how much I know exactly how many projects I have you working on.
Yes.
Are there any other questions for Nicole? Feel free to type them either into the chat or into the answer questions. I see Diane Krasner is on the line. Welcome, Dr. Krasner. So she's left you a message, Nicole, saying outstanding stories. That's great, important history and great lessons learned and shared. Thank you so much. So I'm sure that you have worked with Dr. Krasner over the years on various projects.
Paths at conferences.
Yes, paths have definitely crossed. For those of you who didn't catch it last night, Kathy Harley interviewed Dr. Krasner for part of this Legends series last evening. So that will be available on demand should you want to join in. So I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. So Nicole, I would like to thank you so much for taking the time today and, for telling us some of your story and your history. You certainly are an NSWOC legend. I know you're blushing, and you're probably, if I was in front of you, you'd be kicking me under the table. But because I tell her this all the time, of the fact that I owe a large part of my career to you, as do many NSWOCs in Canada. So on behalf of all of the NSWOCs, we thank you and your colleagues who helped build our profession into what it is today. You've certainly you're an inspiration, past, present, and future. So thank you so much. Thank all of you. And thank all of you for attending today.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.